Hey everybody, I'm back with another episode of E equals MC squared, where entertainment equals meeples and cardboard. The box is square. Kind of. Imagine a world where deadly diseases and viruses run rampant. Imagine your food supply being highly contaminated due to sick and diseased animals. Imagine the military enforcing a quarantine upon your city, and all you and the rest of the population can do is hope you'll be lucky enough to survive the epidemic. While Matt Leacock and Tom Lehman try to create this frightening reality in State of Emergency, the latest expansion to the award-winning pandemic. Will you and your team of experts be able to cure the threats spreading across the globe and save humanity in time? Join me for the next few minutes and I'll show you how it's played. I'm going to assume you already know how to play Pandemic, so I'm not even going to bother covering rules from the base game. Instead, what I want to do is show you how State of Emergency changes and impacts the base game. Now, State of Emergency is a modular expansion, meaning it consists of several mini challenges which can be combined however you like, allowing you to adjust the difficulty and create a unique experience. The Quarantines module is the simplest to use, and it actually feels like a natural aspect to the game. What you have is these 4 quarantine markers at your disposal at the start of the game. And anytime on your turn as an action, you can choose to put one down in the city in which you're located at the time. So in this case, maybe I want to impose a quarantine on Sao Paulo. I put it with the 2 side facing up. What that means is when a city's under quarantine, the next 2 attempts where an infection or an outbreak should occur in that city, they have no effect. After those 2 times, the token gets removed and the city can be affected as normal. One thing I think is really cool about this expansion is you have the Colonel as one of the new roles, and what he does, he can exploit these quarantines a lot easier. For starters, you get an extra 2 tokens at the beginning of the game, so that's 6. And any time that he passes through a city where there's a level 1 quarantine, such as Miami here, all he has to do is pass through that city and it automatically gets flipped back to a 2. Kind of like he's imposing martial law. So I mean, that's really cool, and this module is excellent. If you're finding the base game a little bit too tough and you need that extra advantage, the quarantines would certainly help out. The theme of this challenge is really interesting. I really like it a lot. The idea here is that disease strains are jumping from animals to humans in these rural areas outside the major cities. The danger is that an outbreak in one of these rural areas can easily spread to the nearby cities and have deadly results. The challenge should not be underestimated at all. You will learn that disease and outbreaks can happen just so fast you won't even see it coming. Let me show you what I mean. These additional boards represent the 4 hinterland spaces in the game. You can think of them as a sort of a hub that link all the connected cities. And the connected cities are the ones that have these colored discs here on the board. Now, if you want to get to the hinterlands, all you have to do is move your player to a space that has one of those discs on it, and then your movement will go like this. 1, 2. So your second, I'm right there now. Now that's useful for getting around the board a lot easier, because when I leave the hinterland space, I don't have to go back to where I came from. I could go to any other city that has that disc there. So, going from America to Europe is a lot easier. The other advantage is that sharing knowledge becomes a lot easier. Let's say my first responder goes into the hinterlands with the pharmacist. Here are the city cards that they have. I can just give cards that match the color. So I can just give a blue card to the first responder because they're both in the same space. And now she's one step closer to getting a cure for the blue disease. On one hand, I think this challenge makes the game a little bit easier because you're able to share knowledge and travel much more efficiently. That's very useful. However, the infections and the outbreaks, they have a lot more disastrous effects. For example, before the infection step, you have to roll the infections die. Now, this has a color for every hinterland space on it. Before you do the infections, you have to roll it. In this case, I'm lucky, I'd get nothing. However, if I were to roll it and let's say the blue comes up, I have to put a disease cube into the blue hinterlands. Oh, well in this case, there's already 3 here, so that means outbreak. Then San Francisco would get an infection there, Chicago, Atlanta, and London, if I can ever get them out of the dish here. And you can see that, you know, more cubes there, more potential for outbreaks. More outbreaks, well, I don't have to tell you the rest. I like this next challenge for its simplicity and its increasing variety. In the original pandemic, the only threat that players had to worry about were the actual epidemic cards. Now, with the emergency events challenge, you're going to have to manage a number of different crises, as well as containing those epidemics. When setting up the game, you're going to shuffle in a number of emergency event cards equal to the number of epidemics that you've decided to use. Throughout the game, whenever an emergency event card is drawn, it's played immediately. Now, some of the effects can be instantaneous, while others can be ongoing. If ongoing, then that card will remain in play until another emergency event card gets drawn, replacing that one. Now, some of them can get really, really nasty, so I mean, when these come up, it's usually bad news. The Superbug challenge is by far the most interesting and most difficult. Rookies are not welcome here. If you want to win this challenge, you'd better be ready to put all of your experience to the test. Humanity is depending on you, so you can't afford to make any mistakes. Ready? Here we go. In this challenge, a 5th disease is introduced. To win, you're going to have to cure all 5 diseases and eradicate the Superbug. No problem, right? Don't worry too much, you won't be left unprepared. Remember those quarantines we talked about earlier? They're going to be essential in order to slow the spread of disease. You're also going to get to add these Superbug bonus cards to the player deck, which grant you some really, really nice abilities, and you will be so glad that you have them. I'm not going to go over everything in detail, but I want to walk you through the process of curing the Superbug. First off, you'll need to find a cure for the Superbug. It will still cost you 5 city cards, but the only stipulation is that at least 2 of them must be cities currently containing purple cubes. In this case, San Francisco and Lima both have purple cubes, so that would be a valid cure. Once you get to the research station and you do that cure, then you're going to replace the research station with a vaccine factory and a single dose of vaccine. After the cure for the Superbug has been found, players on their turn can replace a research station with a vaccine factory and a single dose of vaccine. From that point on, at the end of any player's turn, each factory is going to produce 1 single dose of vaccine, and it'll just build up there until there's no more vaccines available. So as an action, anytime a player enters a vaccine factory, they can take all the vaccine doses that are there. From that point on, whenever they move into a city with purple cubes in it, they spend 1 of these doses of vaccines, and you can remove all the purple cubes from that city, thereby reducing the spread of infection and making it that much closer to eradicating the Superbug. Remember, it's not just enough that you cure all the diseases, you also have to eradicate the Superbug. Good luck, this one's tough. State of Emergency is the only expansion that I've played in the Pandemic series, and I really like what it has to offer. I think you get enough of the challenges, combine that with the new event cards and the roll cards. I think there's enough that it's flexible. You can create a unique and fresh experience every time you play. Most of the stuff here doesn't add any more complexity to the game, so you can easily introduce it to new gamers. And for the veterans, I think there's enough here. It's going to be difficult. It's really going to test you, and the tension remains high throughout the whole game. The best thing about State of Emergency is the theme, the overall theme of the game. I mean, the modules, they're so thematic. Everything is just interesting. It makes sense. For example, you've got the Colonel, how easy it is for him to go into cities and impose quarantines. You've got the Hinterlands expansion where you're going in, you got the sick animals that are on the farms. Whatever happened to them, they're getting sick, they're dying. And then the people in the nearby cities are eating that contaminated food and then outbreak and disease happens in those cities so much faster, and then things just spread like wildfire. I showed you some of the emergency event challenge cards earlier. They've got a nice thematic flavor to them. I love some of the names of them, like there's like outright panic, all these people panicking in the cities. The CDC planes are grounded, so I mean it's harder to travel. It's just, everything just screams theme in this game, and the tension is just so high right from the beginning. It's difficult. I mean I can't count how many times I lost this game due to chain reaction outbreaks. They drive me nuts. It's never happened to me in the base game. It's awesome. I love that about it. I feel that everything in State of Emergency just blends in so well with the base game. The only real critique that I have on State of Emergency is that I think it may be a little bit pricey than what it has to offer. Like when you look at it, the Superbug and the Hinterlands expansions, they're the only things that add new components. The rest are just tokens and cards. I mean, to me it's not a big deal because I've only ever played this expansion. So going out and buying that, I mean, the local game stores here, they sell State of Emergency for the same price as the base game. I don't think that's a big problem because this is the only one I've played. But I've read on Board Game Geek that some of the people who have played all the other expansions, they just felt that there wasn't enough in State of Emergency to justify the price. I can only speak from my personal experience. I hope that I've showed you enough here that will help you make that decision whether you think, hey, I like the new stuff, I think it's worth spending the extra money to go and get that and add this to the game, or you feel that, it's good, but it's just not that big of a deal. If you think that your copy of Pandemic has got a little stale and you're looking for a reason to get it off the shelf and back onto the table, then definitely check out State of Emergency. Schneiden. That's for you, Nils. In this challenge, a fifth take two. Now I'm gonna assume that, take four. For the purposes of this review, I'm going to assume that you've already played Plandemic. Take five. I'm going to assume that you already know how to play Pandemic, so I'm not even going to bother... Did I say Plandemic again? Holy freaking hell. I'm going to assume that you've all played Pandemic and you know it fairly well, so I'm not even going to bother covering rules from the base game. Instead, what I want to do is focus on State of Emergency and show you how it changes and impacts the original game. Now you should note that State of Emergency is a modular expansion, which means you'll need the base game to play it. And it also means that you can combine bits and pieces from SOE. Wow. Wow. What a nerd. SOE. SOE, yo. Wow. Take 10.